You're going to do exactly what I say, you disrespectful little black girl, or you can grab your stuff. Manager Kevin Torres gripped Natasha's arm hard, pulling her toward the back of the Elegance restaurant, far from the security cameras. Natasha Williams, 28, never thought that her 2-year job at Chicago's fanciest restaurant would end with her being put down for saying no to a bribe from a powerful customer. Senator Richardson had dropped off an envelope with $5,000 to forget she saw Kevin messing with receipts, and she just said no. "Please, Mr. Torres, let go of my arm," she said with a calm that made the manager even angrier. "I won't take dirty money, that's final." Kevin snarled, shoving her against the wall of the tight hallway. "Listen here, you stuck-up little black girl. You think you're better than everyone, that you can tell me off?" His face turned red with rage. "You're just a waitress I felt sorry for and gave a job. People like you should be thankful to even have work." What Kevin didn't know was that Natasha had caught every word on her phone hidden in her apron pocket. Over the past 6 months, she had carefully recorded every racist remark, every shady deal, every power trip she'd seen in that place. "Let's have a quiet talk in the bathroom," Kevin whispered, squeezing her arm even harder. "Maybe you'll get your place here better after I walk you through exactly how things run." Natasha took a deep breath, keeping the cool she had learned over years of handling men like Kevin. "You don't want to do that, Mr. Torres." "Oh, I don't?" He laughed meanly. "And who's going to stop me? Your little husband? That loser mechanic who can't even give you a decent life?" That's when a cold voice sliced through the air like a knife. "I would say you should let go of my wife right now." Kevin turned and went pale. From the dark corner near the back door, a tall man in a perfect suit was walking toward them. His eyes were cold as ice, and 2 really big, intimidating men walked behind him a few steps back. "Alessandro Moretti," Kevin mumbled, recognizing the name that everyone in town knew, even if they'd never seen his face. Natasha smiled for the first time that night. In 3 years of marriage, she had never told anyone at work that her husband was one of Chicago's most powerful people. She liked her freedom, building her own name away from the shadow of his power. But she had called Alessandro 2 hours earlier, when she knew the situation was getting really dangerous. Alessandro stopped a meter away from Kevin, who was still holding Natasha's arm. "You have 3 seconds to explain why you're touching my wife." Kevin let go of Natasha like she was burning hot. I didn't know. It was just a mix-up, Alessandro tilted his head, his tone dangerously quiet. "You called my wife disrespectful little black girl, and dragged her to a spot without cameras. That seems pretty on purpose to me." Natasha watched the scene with growing happiness. For months, Kevin had treated her like she was worthless, like she was nothing more than some unimportant waitress, like people like her should take any put-down in silence. Now, seeing that cocky man shake before her husband, she knew that her smart patience was about to give far better rewards than any direct fight ever could. Alessandro took a step forward, and Kevin naturally backed away, tripping over his own feet. "I didn't know she was your wife, Mr. Moretti. It was just a confusion between workers." "Nothing serious? Confusion?" Alessandro repeated slowly, like he was enjoying each word. "You just called my wife disrespectful little black girl and dragged her to a hidden place against her choice. That seems too specific for a confusion." Natasha watched Kevin fall apart before her eyes. For 2 years, that man had treated her like garbage, making racist jokes disguised as humor, touching her back in wrong ways, and cutting her pay whenever she asked anything. He saw her as a throwaway black waitress with no ties, no power, no meaning. "Look, Mr. Moretti," Kevin tried to get some confidence back, "your wife has been trouble lately. Questioning rules, refusing to follow simple orders. Orders like taking bribes." Natasha cut in, pulling her phone from her apron pocket. "Like this recording of you offering me $5,000 to forget about Senator Richardson's fake receipts?" The color drained completely from Kevin's face. You recorded me." Natasha smiled for the first time that night. "Kevin, over the past 6 months, you've been recorded 43 times, photographed 27 times, and written about in 62 detailed reports that I sent weekly to my husband." For months, while Kevin put her down daily, Natasha had carefully built a complete file of the restaurant's illegal stuff. Every bribed customer, every changed receipt, every racist comment, every wrong touch, all carefully recorded and dated. Did you really think that a black woman with a business degree from Northwestern University, who speaks 4 languages and has a master's in hotel management, was working as a waitress because she had no other option? Natasha tilted her head, her polite tone hiding her growing satisfaction. Kevin opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. But you never said. You thought what? That because I'm black I should take any put down in silence? That because I work as a waitress I couldn't have schooling or connections? Natasha took a step forward. You built a picture of me based purely on your bias, Kevin. And that was your biggest mistake. Alessandro watched his wife with clear pride. When she had suggested working undercover to look into the activities of the restaurant he thought was being used for money washing, he had worried. But Natasha had pushed. She wanted to prove she could help the family business using her own skills. During these 2 years, Natasha continued, you didn't just put down me. You put down Maria in the kitchen, saying that Mexicans are only good for washing dishes. You bothered Jessica the sommelier because she should be grateful for the chance, and you regularly stole from customers who trusted you. Kevin tried one last desperate move. Wait, I can explain all this. We can make a deal, Mr. Moretti. I have useful information about other restaurants, about competitors, information. Alessandro smiled coldly. Kevin, you're offering information to the man who has known everything that happens in the city for years. My wife wasn't here to find secrets. She was here to gather evidence. The difference was huge, and Kevin was finally starting to understand the size of his situation. He hadn't been caught red-handed. He had been studied, listed, and documented like a lab sample for months. Senator Richardson will be thrilled to know that your deals have been recorded, Natasha continued casually, as will Judge Morrison, Congressman Walsh, and that construction big shot you've been helping for over a year. Kevin felt his legs buckle. Each name Natasha mentioned represented not just a lost customer, but a powerful person who would now become his enemy when they found out they had been exposed because of his mess-up. Please, he whispered, the cocky tone completely gone. I have a family, children. Funny you should mention family, Alessandro said softly, because that's exactly what you should have remembered before. You laid your hands on mine. What Kevin didn't, no, and Natasha was about to show, was that the last 6 months of records had not only caught a corrupt manager, they had mapped out a whole network of corruption linking politicians, judges, and businessmen in the city, using elegance as the center for their dirty deals. Each new put-down Kevin had given only made something stronger within Natasha that he had never been able to see. A quiet strength fed by the very unfairness he tried to make normal, building not only a case against him, but against a whole system that people like Kevin stood for and protected. As Kevin begged for mercy, Natasha calmly opened the briefcase she had brought with her, a briefcase he had seen hundreds of times, always thinking it held only sales reports or customer complaints. For 2 years, Kevin had watched his black worker take that briefcase home every night, never guessing that she was putting together his own destruction page by page. Kevin, do you remember when you said I should be thankful for having a job? Natasha flipped through the documents carefully. Specifically on March 23rd, when Senator Richardson came with that campaign check that you put into the restaurant's personal account. Kevin tried one last desperate play, pulling his phone from his pocket. I'm going to call Senator Richardson right now. He'll handle this. He has pull in this town. Connections you can't even imagine. Alessandro and Natasha shared an amused look. Kevin really thought that his political connections could save him from a probe that had already brought in the FBI for months. Go ahead and call, Alessandro said softly. But you should know that Senator Richardson is at this very moment being arrested at his house for money washing and tax dodging. The color drained completely from Kevin's face. That's not possible. Operation Clean Plate, Natasha said casually, turning a page in the folder. 6 months of joint probe between the FBI, the IRS, and the Chicago police. 12 politicians, 8 judges, 15 businessmen, all linked through the deals you made easier here at Elegance. Kevin staggered, leaning against the wall. For months he had felt untouchable, guarded by a network of corrupt politicians he thought were his friends. Powerful men who greeted him by name, who gave him generous bribes, who made him feel important. Judge Morrison, Kevin whispered. Arrested 2 hours ago, Alessandro replied. As were Congressman Walsh and that construction businessman you looked up to so much. Natasha continued flipping through the folder, each page showing months of careful work. Photos of sketchy checks, recordings of talks, transfer records, even handwriting studies proving Kevin's forgeries. You know what strikes me the most, Kevin? Natasha paused at a specific photo. In this paper, you forged Alessandro's own signature. The man standing next to you right now has known your every move for months, and you had the nerve to fake his name. It was then that Kevin realized the true size of his situation. He hadn't just stolen from customers or taken bribes. He had accidentally stolen from the most dangerous man in Chicago, writing down every crime while thinking he was being smart. Please, Kevin dropped to his knees. I have young children, an ex-wife who depends on support payments. I can give everything back. I can tell on the others. Tell? Natasha tilted her head. Kevin, you don't get it. We don't need your words. We have 2,000 pages of solid evidence, clear recordings, science analysis. You're not a source of information. You're the final product. For months, while putting down Natasha on a daily basis, Kevin had been studied like a lab sample. Every movement looked at, every crime written down, every connection mapped. He thought he was controlling a quiet black waitress, when in fact he was being played by a federal operation that used him as bait for much bigger fish. Michael, Alessandro called, and an elegant man in a dark suit showed up in the hallway. This is Michael Santos, my advisor. He is also a licensed federal lawyer and was managing the operation with my wife. Kevin looked at Michael, vaguely remembering his face. You've eaten here several times. 3 times in the last 6 months, Michael confirmed, smiling. Always watching, always recording. You served wine to the man who was building your criminal case, Kevin. And you were always very polite. The twist was brutal. For months, Kevin had treated these men with respect, thinking they admired his cleverness in business. In fact, they were studying him like a hunter studies its prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Natasha wrote down every deal, Michael continued. But we needed something more. We needed you to do a crime in front of Alessandro himself. A crime that couldn't be denied or played down. Senator Richardson's bribe, Natasha explained. $5,000 offered in front of 3 hidden cameras and 2 federal witnesses. The perfect crime to close your case. Kevin finally got it. The bribe situation had not been a coincidence or a random chance. It had been carefully planned to force him to do a federal crime in the presence of solid witnesses. You gave us exactly what we needed, Alessandro said calmly. A white man in a power spot, regularly putting down a qualified black woman, while at the same time stealing from customers and helping political corruption. The perfect crime with the most awful reasons. Michael opened his own briefcase, showing a stack of already signed arrest papers. Kevin Torres, you're under arrest for money washing, tax dodging, racial bias in the workplace, and plot to commit federal fraud. As Michael read his rights, Kevin looked one last time at Natasha. The woman he had treated like trash for 2 years stood there, calm and proud, watching the fall of the corruption empire he had helped build. What Kevin would never find out was that his arrest would be only the first piece, to fall in an operation that would completely change the political scene of Chicago, and that the little black waitress he had so looked down on was about to become one of the city's most powerful women, not out of payback, but out of carefully done justice. As the handcuffs closed around his wrists, Kevin realized that every put-down he had given had only fed a quiet strength that now proved more powerful than all his cockiness and bias combined, proving that looking down on someone based on bias is not only morally wrong, it is strategically deadly. As Michael cuffed Kevin, a loud sound of sirens filled the air outside the restaurant. Through the windows, Kevin could see a fleet of FBI cars surrounding the Elegance. Federal agents walking in the front door with search and taking warrants. No, Kevin whispered, reality finally hitting him like a hammer. You can't do this to me. I worked with you. I made the deals easier. Made easier? Natasha chuckled softly, a laugh that cut Kevin deeper than any scream. Kevin, did you really think we were partners? That we shared some kind of criminal teamwork? Alessandro signaled to his men, who right away began walking Kevin toward the waiting federal agents. But Natasha raised her hand, asking for one final moment. Before you walk out of our lives forever, Kevin, I want you to understand exactly what happened here. She opened the briefcase one last time, showing not only papers, but photographs that made Kevin stagger. The first photo showed Kevin at a nearby bar 2 months ago, bragging to other managers about how he kept the colored workers in line. The second showed him changing credit card receipts. The third caught the exact moment he had placed his hand on Jessica, the sommelier, against her choice. Restaurants in Chicago, Natasha continued calmly. All of them got copies of this evidence last night, along with a letter explaining your ways of bias and corruption. Kevin's face lost all color. His career in the restaurant world wasn't just over. It was completely destroyed. No respected place in the city would ever hire him again. Your ex-wife also got a complete copy, Michael added casually. Of special interest was the records of the $50,000 you stole from support payment funds over the past 2 years. Kevin spun around. Jennifer can't. She won't. Actually, she already filed for a full review of the divorce deal this morning, Alessandro told him. Apparently, finding out that her ex-husband is a federal criminal really changes the terms of child custody. It was then that Kevin realized the true size of his destruction. It wasn't just his job or his freedom. It was his family, his name, his whole identity being carefully torn apart piece by piece. Please, he begged one last time, tears beginning to form. My children. They'll grow up knowing their father is a criminal. Your children will grow up knowing that actions have results, Natasha replied firmly. And maybe that will stop them from becoming men like you. When the federal agents finally took Kevin away, he turned one last time to Natasha. Why didn't you say who you were? Why did you act like just a waitress? Natasha smiled, the first time she had shown any real feeling during the whole standoff. Because I wasn't acting anything, Kevin. I am a waitress. A waitress with 2 college degrees who speaks 4 languages, who is married to one of the city's most powerful men, and who just ran the biggest anti-corruption operation in Chicago history. She paused, watching Kevin being put into the federal car. The difference between us is that you looked at me and saw only skin color and job. I looked at you and saw exactly who you really were from day one. As the car drove away, Natasha turned to Alessandro. Has the press been told? Channel 7 News goes on air in an hour, Alessandro confirmed. Operation Clean Plate. Corruption network taken down by undercover probe. Your photo will be on the front page of the Chicago Tribune tomorrow. Michael came up with a tablet, showing the headlines that were already starting to show online. Hero Waitress reveals $1 million corruption scheme, and Black woman breaks white power system in Chicago, ruled social media. In politicians, 8 judges, 15 businessmen, Natasha murmured, watching the list of arrests that kept growing in real time. 2 years of work, 6 months of heavy records, and Kevin Torres was the key that opened all the doors. What Kevin would never know was that his arrest was being shown live to a classroom at Northwestern University where Natasha had been asked to speak about undercover probing and social justice. The following week, law, business, and journalism students watched in respectful silence as a woman, who had been regularly looked down on because of her color and job, carefully took down an empire of privilege and corruption built on decades of getting away with it, proving that real smarts doesn't show itself through yelling or fighting, but through smart patience and careful records that turns each put-down suffered into solid evidence for the most satisfying delivery of justice possible. Months later, Natasha stood on the main stage of the Chicago Convention Center before a crowd of over 2,000 people. Mayors, business leaders, social fighters, and college students rose to their feet in applause as she got the National Anti-Corruption Award from the governor of Illinois. It is an honor to recognize a woman who not only caught corruption, but completely changed our understanding of how bias and privilege feed criminal systems, said the governor, handing her the gold plaque. Kevin Torres at that moment was in the federal jail in Terre Haute, serving a 15-year sentence for money washing, racial bias, and criminal plot. His desperate tries to get a reduced sentence in exchange for information had failed. There was simply nothing he could offer that Natasha had not already carefully written down. His ex-wife, Jennifer, had been given full custody of their children and completely flipped the divorce deal. The $50,000 stolen from child support, plus interest and fees, meant that Kevin would leave prison already owing more than $200,000. For 2 years, Natasha began her speech, her voice echoing perfectly throughout the packed hall. I was treated as invisible by a system that thought it knew my worth, based only on the color of my skin and my job. But being invisible can be the greatest superpower when used smartly. The crowd laughed, but there was a deep seriousness in her words. The cameras of CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC caught every move, every look, showing live to millions of viewers across the country. In the front row, Alessandro watched his wife with clear pride. At his side, Michael Santos smiled quietly, remembering the day Natasha had suggested working undercover. They had worried, concerned for her safety. Now, she was thought of as one of America's most powerful women. Operation Clean Plate wasn't just about arresting criminals, Natasha continued. It was about proving that looking down on someone based on bias is not only morally wrong, it's strategically deadly. Senator Richardson had been sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Judge Morrison lost his robe and faced charges for corruption. Congressman Walsh saw his political career destroyed and his stuff taken. 15 powerful businessmen in the city had lost business papers, government contracts, and names built over decades. Every person who joined this scheme looked down on not only me, but the ability of a black woman to be smarter, more prepared, and more strategic than all of them put together, Natasha said, her voice growing strong. What Kevin would never find out was that Natasha had turned down offers from 6 different schools to take up chairs in criminal justice and undercover probing. She chose to start the Williams Moretti Institute for Fighting Corruption, a group that trained probers from across the country in ways for sneaking in and writing down white-collar crime. Months after my arrest, she continued, I was reached out to by Harvard Law School, Yale, Stanford, and Northwestern. They all wanted me to create courses on undercover probing applied to social justice. Alessandro had honestly grown his business, turning Elegance into the first of a chain of restaurants approved by the Federal Bureau as corruption-free places. The brand had become the same as openness and business honesty. Maria, the Mexican kitchen worker Kevin had put down, was now the area manager of 3 spots in the chain. Jessica, the bothered sommelier, had opened her own wine advice business with startup money quietly given by Alessandro. Kevin Torres once told me that I should be thankful for having a job. Natasha paused, letting the twist of the situation sink in with the crowd. Today, I create jobs for more than 300 people through our school and the companies we help approve. The change had spread far beyond the single case. Chicago had put in place the Natasha Williams Act, making all business places with more than 20 workers go through separate checks for bias and corruption every 2 years. During those 2 years waiting tables, she said, her voice thick with controlled feeling, I learned true strength doesn't come from yelling when we are wronged. It comes from turning every put-down into evidence, every disrespect into records, every moment of anger into planned strategy. Kevin in his cell got weekly letters from former customers suing him in regular court. Senator Richardson, Judge Morrison, all the politicians he thought were his allies now publicly blamed him for showing their crimes. He had become the perfect fall guy, the man everyone could hate without questioning the system that had let him work for so long. My husband once asked me if I felt sorry for them. Natasha smiled softly. And I replied, I feel sorry for anyone who mixes social standing with moral rightness, who mixes privilege with smarts, who believes that putting down others makes them greater. The crowd burst into applause again. On social media, your Natasha Williams had been trending worldwide for 3 days straight. College students got tattoos of phrases from her speeches. Young black women across the country sent photos holding handwritten signs that read, Being invisible is superpower. Kevin Torres believed for 2 years that he was controlling a quiet waitress, she said, walking across the stage with the confidence of someone who had turned pain into purpose. In fact, he was being studied by a federal operation that used him as bait for fish much bigger than he could ever imagine. Alessandro watched the crowd's reactions, seeing tears in the eyes of many people. Natasha had become more than his wife. She was a force for social change who inspired people on every land. The best payback, Natasha concluded, her voice echoing through the respectful silence of the hall, is not to destroy those who have hurt you. It is to build something so great, so important, so changing that they spend the rest of their lives regretting that they looked down on you. When she left the stage to applause that lasted 5 straight minutes, Alessandro met her backstage. How does it feel to be America's most inspiring woman? Natasha smiled, adjusting the gold plaque she had just received. I feel like someone who has turned 2 years of put-downs into a lifetime of purpose. Kevin Torres would never know that. His name had become the same as self-destructive, cockiness in cases studied at law schools. That his recordings were used as an example of how bias blinds people to the truth around them. That his downfall had inspired federal rules on workplace bias. Months after his arrest, 3 documentaries about the case were being made at the same time. Hollywood had bought the rights to the story for a 7-figure sum, and Natasha Williams Moretti had become living proof that looking down on someone because of bias is not only morally awful, it is the most efficient form of self-destruction there is. The waitress Kevin had looked down on for 2 years was now a speaker at the United Nations, an anti-corruption helper to 3 European countries, and the writer of the book Strategic Invisibility, which stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 15 straight weeks. While Kevin counted the days in his federal cell, Natasha woke up every morning knowing that she had turned her pain into power, her put-downs into inspiration, and her seeming defeat into the most satisfying win possible. Not just against a biased man, but against a whole system that allows people like him to do well at the cost of those they think are beneath them. This story of change and justice proves that smarts and sticking with it always win out over bias and cockiness.